So here's some of my trades from today. I'm going to start with AMD. By the way, these are my new dark charts. Definitely easier on the eyes, and I had a bit too much fun with the colors, so it looks like a techno dance party here. But it's pretty cool. So here's AMD. Honestly, the daily isn't anything special to my eyes. I normally do breakouts with like a clear range, which there did end up being a range here, but I guess I didn't necessarily see it right away. Plus, I wasn't sure what the markets were going to do. But overall, I mean, AMD clearly in uptrend, super duper strong. The ATR has been increasing. It has had wider ranges here in the last few weeks, but you can see here that I guess it did have, it had an all-time high here, had a bit of a range here on these days, and then sold down, had a indecision, and kind of reversed right back up with a strong green day, and so it did sort of get back in this range, and so I think that's what happened today, is that it actually broke out of this old range. So made sort of an all-time high range here, fake breakout to continue, came down, but then quickly did a doji, reversed, strong move that really said that this was not ready to continue selling down, gets back in the range, has a bit of a compression because it has another inside day, and then right up against the edge here, it started to compress on the intraday. So I guess this wick here sort of confused me and had me not really looking at it earlier in the day, but watching it intraday, I see now how it was a pretty good break from here towards that top of the wick as a target, and then eventually that wick target was broken and continuation happened, and it got even higher. So here's the 5-minute. You can see here 2 days ago we had that good move back up into the range, has an inside day, and then today opens up right at the top. It does hold it, which is sort of tricky. It gets above it and holds it, but then it sells down. And so this is actually, now this is reminding me of sort of what Tyler sees sometimes, but which is the getting back into the range and then gets right back out of it. So it's sort of tricky because, at the open, it looks like it was holding it and it was going to be a long. Then it sells off, but then that sell-off was super, super quick. It only took about 10, 15 minutes. Let's look at it zoomed in. So I guess it takes longer than 10, 15 minutes. It takes about 20 minutes, comes down, you have some wicks, and then you have a really strong candle to come back in. So I guess at that point, once it gets generally above these daily levels here, it's now, you're now in the idea of what we were thinking earlier. So that's why you just have to be flexible all the time. Here it might have been a long, and then once it broke this general area, it was not a long anymore. We weren't sure. Maybe it was gonna, maybe it was doing what this wick was doing here, which was it was gonna wick up, fake us out, bag holders, and then back in to this sort of range here, and then come screaming back down to here, and I guess that could have essentially been a bigger double top too, right? But then you have to say, so this is where you want to look at multiple time frames, because you're like, okay, it could have done that little double top we were talking about, but what's the highest time frame say? Well, the highest time frame, I guess we could go to the monthly, but we'll just do the weekly. I mean, look at the weekly, super duper strong. There's some wicks, but the weekly is trending up, right? So you have the momentum going up. The daily up as well, right? And we've had a big move recently, but we've sort of consolidated. We pulled back here, came back up, and then consolidated quite a bit here. So there's nothing saying it can't keep going. And then, so we zoom down even lower. 60 minute, 30 minute, etc. So everything's saying it's up. So yeah, you could reverse it back to the mean, back into the range, but for the most part, it's been making new highs. So anyways, so it gets down under here, it gets back above, and then you could start thinking of a potential long. And let's look at it on the 1 minute. So right here, this double bottom I liked as a sort of rejection of that range. It gets back into it, and it's not perfect. You can see it's wicking around, but generally this area is where it was a fake breakdown, and then you should be getting long. Now, I didn't trade this all that well, so I got in, I got out a little early, and then got in again, added in, and then I backed off a little bit here. I just definitely didn't trade it that well. So I'm just mainly going to go over what I like about the stock and the move. So even though it did that fake breakdown and got back in, this was still not very clean. This was still tricky. So you can't really go by, a pullback necessarily, because look at this pullback. I mean, this was a strong engulfing all the way back down and then back up. So while you can get in there, it's just you can just see how many engulfing candles there are. This is just better set up for add in some shares, have a really wide stop. You have to ask yourself, where's the actual point that I think that it's not a long anymore? And initially we thought it was right here, and then it sold down, but then it got back above. So I would have said somewhere under here. Once it gets back under that, it's not what I think it is. Or I guess you could say, or maybe if it gets under this kind of double bottom breakout, you can combine that with the volume here that started. So a combination of this area, once it gets below this area, it's not a fake breakdown and a long anymore. So when you have this kind of crappy candle action, you just put your stop really wide, either low of day or underneath this area right here, and just start accumulating the shares however you want, according to sort of this bigger time frame compression. It might take a few hours, right? Because you could keep adding trend lines here. You could add a trend line there, and you could add a trend line. Let's move some of all these levels. And then you might need to modify it, right? Maybe you need to change it and move it over here from the double bottom like that. So you just constantly be adjusting it. And sometimes you do need to go a little bit lower, and that's okay. And I think that's where you do want to adjust these trend lines, because the bigger picture, if you have the bigger picture sort of figured out, you can let it pull back. Because the longer that it comes down and gets people, hits their bids, gets their shares, the bigger this is going to be essentially anyways. So this doesn't have to necessarily be clean, just as long as it doesn't get below the level you're thinking of. And as long as you don't run out of time. I mean, here we did start getting closer to the end of the day. I guess this was 2 o'clock right here. So you had 2 more hours. So that was good. But you don't want this to be like 3:30 and only have a half hour left. You're most likely going to get some kind of fake and then back to the VWAP or whatever. So I don't know, there's a lot going on in this, but what I did like about it, here's an ATR. Like I said, the ATR has been really big lately with these big daily candles. And so you can see here, so for the majority of the day, leading up to about 2 p.m., it only moved half an ATR. Had about 1 R vol, which, lots of things were in play, but not necessarily. There were a lot of stocks that didn't have high R vol as well. So 1 R vol was good, and I think it was higher than 1 at one point. I think it was 1.1. So like I said, this was a good potential to just add in some shares, hold, keep watching it, change the time frame a little bit, change it to the 5-minute, change it to the 15-minute, see if you can start to see some more things. On the 15-minute, this was not pretty at all. I mean, look at these huge wicks. So clearly there was pressure here, and then even pressure here. So this just was not pretty in here, but it got pretty once it broke out here. Then you eventually had some wicks to help you out this way. So probably this is where the everything changed. So your idea was sort of playing out just in an ugly fashion here. And you even hit this area, it rejects it, which you sort of know that that could happen. You know, you just extend the trend line to bigger compression. Then you get these two big wicks on the 15-minute chart. Now something's starting to happen, and this is probably where it gets a lot cleaner. But even then, I mean, I got in and I added in some more, and I had I had a half a stop down here and another one even lower, and sure enough came down and got me, and then took off from there. And you can see here that volume really kicked in right around an hour before the close. So this was the all-time high up here, so that was a target. This generally 162 area. And yeah, once it broke with this volume, it got cleaner. You got multiple moves up, you have a nice pullback, and then it breaks that all-time high, but does give it some trouble here. And this is towards the close. So this is about to close literally at the top, the high of the day. So I get out a lot of my shares, it pulls back, I add in, get really heavy here, and just hold on through the aftermarket, and it ends up working out because it really does just trickle up, goes up to the high. I partialed some, and then I walked away for a few hours, and then I partialed some more, and I'm just going to hold the rest for tomorrow. So not an amazing breakout, but we've seen this before. There's lots of things you can look at here. I think what we do love to see is a clear low of the day, and then seeing the low of the day break with some conviction, but then it gets right back above it. That's like a clear trapping people, or, you know, is just hitting a bid, or it's, you know, it's clearly changing its mind. And you know, it first starts with this little sort of compression here too. Water falls down, people are getting short, and then it immediately comes back up. And sure, it isn't the prettiest here, but I do think this was about the level to hold, which it comes down in wicks and it holds. So that was pretty cool. And it didn't, let's see if it did move an ATR. I think it did. Well, I guess it did into the aftermarket. It moved to 1 ATR, so that's good. So let's see, other things that I liked. Okay, so here's mRNA. I honestly didn't really think about it too much or dissect it very much. I do agree that there's a lot of bag holders up here with all these gap downs. So anytime we get these big moves up, you can see this big sell back down. So Friday, you can see this big wick. I would expect these wicks numerous times as you get up here. So today was tricky. I basically just did a low of day short, which didn't work out. But when you look at it here, the 2-minute, you can see here's the pre-market action, which is a pretty decent range. Here's the ATR though. Here's the thing. Here's 1 ATR. 24.50, right? So at the open, price goes down a little bit, comes all the way up, hits, you know, basically the low of these days here. So basically fills the gap, which right away should be an alarm and be short bias here for a filling the gap. Clearly hits it, even though it's hard because there's positive news, etc. But I think there's enough things to tell us to go short here because of the recent move up. And all the technical analysis here. This was basically that final gap, or that first gap that started it all. I mean, this was a decent gap, but this was the biggest gap that kind of trapped all of these guys. So it hits that up here, fills the gap. Yep, right there. and then sells off really, really quick. Within, I don't know, 20 minutes here, we're almost at 1 ATR. So I did try to short it multiple times, failed. I just missed the short. I mean, the thing is it could have kept going. It had super high RVol, but the entry was up here. And this is a potential entry, but this was harder technically, because if you look here, we had a super strong day, a super strong wick, at least on Friday, and this was the high. So I was shorting right into the daily level. Nice psychological level, 350, super strong wick right here, right at this 100-day moving average, etc., etc. I think there was enough things to say, well, don't short the break, short it after it breaks. So, either short it from up here, or either go long here, expecting it to hold, even though it's not the prettiest, or wait till it gets under 350 and then short, right? And then your analysis of, well, it has high RVol, retested the gap fill, and now it's sell the news, etc. Wait till it gets under and then go short. So that would have been, and then you hopefully would have gotten maybe another ATR, or maybe even a half an ATR there. So, and yeah, it's funny because it, had that filled the gap, sold off super fast, and then just sort of chopped its way all the way up. And even then, like, look at this, like it chopped its way all the way up, had this crazy sell down, and then right back up. And so sometimes mRNA can be tricky. What I really did like was AAL, and I don't think I traded it, but I really liked it here. So let's go over the daily here. I think you guys will like this. Really nice daily range, in my opinion. Basically, here are the highs after COVID, or this year, since COVID. These are the recent highs, double top, right? And then can't get any lower than here, and makes a really nice range with a clear top of 2250. And even makes a decent bottom, sort of a trending up bottom, so not a perfect support. But generally this area, you can see here in the VPA, there's a big gap right here. So really, once this area fails, which is sort of all of these lows combined, it's gonna jump real quick down here, which is exactly what it did. And you can just say, this was the lowest one of all these lows, and this is what I liked as support, the final support, right? So that's what I liked. And then on Friday, that's what happened. It gaps down. It opens literally right there. And it doesn't even, this is a gap and go. This is a gap and go because the day before was an up move. So it was a green candle. So right away you have a big gap underneath support. It's a gap and go. It's just gonna, these people are selling right away. And then now shorts are starting to come in. So Friday would have been a good trade. If you look at Friday here on the 5-minute, here's the gap. Sort of moves around in the pre-market here. One last move up right before the open. And let's make this level global so you can see it right there. Right? So it's not perfect to the penny, but I mean, we're talking 20 cents here. So this would have been a really good short for a range resistance or support becoming resistance. Multiple factors here. It's a gap and go. There's a green candle, gapping down, bag holders underneath the support level, and then even pre-market even shows you multiple times that sure enough it is being respected. It's pre-market high. So that was a great short, and you would have got an awesome move. But then today you had a pullback. You had almost a retest with this breakdown. So this was Friday, half day, comes up, closes right around here, but then trickles up all morning. What do you know, about half hour before the open, it hits this area. Well, this isn't very much volume in the pre-market. You have to remember that we only want to trade stocks in the pre-market if it's like an open stock. It has to have enough volume, and this didn't have enough volume. I mean, it's decent. It had some volume, actually. Looking at it now, yeah, it was having 100,000 shares per 5 minutes. So yeah, it was trading nicely. So that's good, I guess. But anyways, normally, there's not enough volume to really break through this. I mean, you're gonna need a lot of volume here to break back into that support up in here in this gap, right? So this would have been the entry, in my opinion, for a short, for a retest, a breakdown, a retest, and then a short again. And sure, you wouldn't have gotten the whole move, but you could have gotten a pretty big move. So my targets would have been probably a pre-market low, probably the high of this level right here, the high of this pullback. So that would have been a target, and then the low of this would have been a target, and then had it broken through that down here. Those two would have been my targets right there, and then down here. And and all that would have been, all of that, this would have happened even before the open. Oh no, this would have happened right into the open, so that would have been tricky. So I really like that trade. Quite a bit different than the AMD, just totally different than the AMD breakout trade, but totally makes sense to me. So I would expect this not to get above 1850. We'll round up, say 1850. And I think it's going to stay underneath here, and this is eventually going to trickle down some more. So really, this would be a good time to, I guess you could buy a put, even though buying puts are going to be expensive. You're going to pay some premium right now because it seems so bearish. So I'm not sure, but somehow you could short this and risk. You can either risk above 1850, but I would go even higher and maybe risk above these levels here and hide behind those too. So risking somewhere up here. So you can short in here. If it breaks this, start to get worried once it gets closer to 19, then get out. But I would think that this is going to keep going. If this doesn't keep going and it comes up under here, I think this is going to be back into the range. This is going to be sort of the false breakdown back into the range. Then I would get long and go towards the other end of the range again, And I would probably want to see it get above here, this 19. So once it gets back above 19, oh yeah, then I would be long bias again. So this is actually a pretty good setup in my mind. So here for the SPY, you can see here that before this Omicron news and before the half day Thanksgiving, we had a range set of this 470.5 down to 466.5. You can see here multiple days in here, and then it does sell back down, but then within a matter of 2 days, rips right back up. You can see here this was almost a nice move straight up, and then holds it on this day, and then holds it longer, gets all the way to the top, comes down, holds it again. So this was out of this bigger picture range. This was the good level here, 466.50. You can see here multiple ways to see that it is, VPA right here is showing you, and then as well as these nice confirmations here. And then tries to break out a few times and then fails, comes back. So yeah, this was a level as well here, because then it comes all the way up, and then this, and so this is why we say range resistance. No matter the news, we didn't know that there was going to be a new variant or whatever, right? But ranges are ranges for a reason. And a lot of times the levels line up with the news. And here's a perfect example. We just said that this was the top of the range, right? Top of the range. Fake breakout, comes back down. Bottom of the range, bottom of the range. Gets back down again, can't keep getting lower, and then comes back up, right? So what does it do right up here at the top of the range? This is a range resistance trade. So now no one was really going to short the SPY right here, but had you done that, it would have been perfectly acceptable because you do have a really nice level here. You would have shorted right here, and this is when the gap down happened. So overnight, it went from here down to underneath the range, and then you had a breakdown. So that's what happens. So what I'm saying is, had on this day the Omicron variant news come out, it could have very well sold off really nicely, or even gapped down again, gapped down just like it did here, right here. And then you would have gotten a gap and go, or maybe a retest and then a go. So that's why we have these levels in these ranges, because a lot of times the news does line up with the technical analysis. I mean, that's how we want to trade. We want to have news, have RVOL. We don't necessarily know if it's going to be positive or negative. Sometimes we can't tell, but if we have the good levels, then we play the bounces or the breaks. So I just thought that was interesting how it trickled all the way up here the night before, probably Wednesday night before Thanksgiving, and then boom, gap down. And so we have those levels set up, and you can see here what happens. So Friday, gaps way down, pulls back, and then we had a breakdown, right? So this was essentially a breakdown trade. Once it got under here, and then once it got under here, this was extra confirmation that this was a breakdown, this was a retest, and then a sell-off. Obviously, this is all hindsight, but that makes sense to me. And so then today, we weren't sure what was going to happen. If we were going to get a continuation, if we were going to get that was an overreaction. We don't know all the results yet about the new variant, combined with a half-day low liquidity, so we can get overreactions even more. And so you can see here, price gaps up, makes a nice pre-market range. And so it was really on whichever way you thought. I mean, what bias were you here? Because it was looking strong, but I don't think this was necessarily the level. I guess you could have shorted here. I guess we were saying that this was the 10 out of 10 level, and then this was maybe 8 out of 10 level, this one right here. But it didn't get all the way up to that. So I'm not sure if you would have wanted to short it here. So then it sold off into the open, and it found support right here, which is a combination of pre-market support, and I think even more importantly, this was sort of like a second day play, because Friday was the big day. That was the huge RVOL day, the big sell-off, etc. So these levels are really important. So you combine this pre-market low support with these retests where price can't get back above here. So this pretty much lines up like that. So you could have gone long here, or maybe waited and noticed, hey, it didn't want to break through that support, and now it's going long. And maybe you were delayed and late. However, you saw that, hey, this held, and so then you waited for it to just get up in this area. That would have been totally fine to get long right there. I had to walk away for a second, but I have no idea where I left off. But I would just say that once the support here held, you could have started to think long. You know, how can I get long? How can I get in long? And I would say, you know, maybe with this inverted head and shoulders here, with the stop under here, or even you could get long. Just get long with the high, because you kind of combine. You could say the high of day you could potentially get long. I actually thought it was going to be a reverse here, so I was thinking short. I was more short bias here, but you know, you have ATR here, so it had the potential to get up here, and so you combine an ATR with that good level, and it almost hit it to the penny perfectly as a target here today. And then from there, you could have had a decent short. You would have had to hold on to it for a while, but it eventually went all the way back down to VWAP. So you had a bunch of trades in here too. Just it was just kind of tricky with this sell-off day on Friday. All right, that's all I got.